Frank update. Your test does have certain items whose amounts have changed in the last year. Gosh darn it, these tests are so frustrating for me because the North American Securities Administrators Association, the people who write the 65 and 66, they don't send me an email telling me, we finally updated the test. More often than not, I find that they're very, very slow to update the test. But I think that it would be very helpful for all of you guys out there to know how it's changed now. And I will hope and pray that it is on your test, because it really should be now, these things. So under Dodd Frank, we had some changes to the requirement of what investment advisors must register federally. So just kind of to review here, investment advisors, this is the firm, of course, they're either going to register federally with the SEC, or they're going to register at the state level. So this rule is under Dodd-Frank, and I'm hoping this is what you would see on your test. So even though maybe before I've said something different, use this. Okay, so use this in your course for your exam in 2013. So the registration requirement was bumped up quite significantly. The SEC says that we want registration of investment advisors that have assets under management of $100 million or more. $100 million or more. It's also true that if the investment advisor manages a mutual fund, hedge fund, or private fund, which I'll define here in a minute, then these investment advisors register federally as well. Or if the investment advisor is going to be doing business in 15 states or more. 15 states or more, then they register federally with the SEC. So federally covered investment advisors. State registered investment advisors are those who have assets under management of less than $100 million. So this is the newest rule that we have in this area. No, that doesn't change. If you remember within the law section, the very last law section that you study, we talk about certain investment advisors, no matter the size of assets they have under management, register at the state level, like investment advisors to insurance companies. That's still true. Or if the only advice you give is to buy U.S. government securities, you register at the state level. That's still true. Those have not changed. So the SEC cares about the big ones. Assets under management of $100 million or more, 15 or more states that the fund is that the IA is registering in, or that they manage a mutual fund, hedge fund, or private fund. What's the private fund? There used to be what was called the federal de minimis rule. You might have heard me talk about it. The federal de minimis rule. The federal de minimis rule went like this. It said if the investment advisor had fewer than 15 public clients, did not advertise as an investment advisor, no matter the size of assets under management, they didn't have to register federally. They had to register at the state level. The federal de minimis rule was revoked, gone. Okay, so this is no longer true. And it's been in effect long enough that I would expect it to be on the test. I can hope, right? These people are called private fund advisors. Instead of filing Form ADV, they file what's called Form PF, stands for private fund. And that filing is not public. It's not within the Investment Advisory Registration Depository. So private fund advisors do now register federally. Private fund advisors, so it was revoked. On an annual basis, all investment advisory firms are required to renew their membership. So these limits that we have on the board are for our first registration, when the fund is new. The investment advisor is new. The assets under management are $100 million or more federally, under $100 million state. But on an annual level, the IA renews registration annually. Assets under management change every single day, so that there is this little bumper on both sides as far as when a fund goes, when an IA goes to renew its registration, it determines its assets under management. Upon renewal, a firm that has over 110 million that was previously state registered, okay? So this is the state. We said under 100 million in assets under management, okay? So here we are at its annual renewal, and they look at their assets under management and they find that they have 112 million, let's say. If over 110 million, they must switch. They must switch to SEC level. SEC level. Another way of saying that is that their annual renewal, their assets under management, 110 or less, they can stay registered at the state level. If their assets under management are 110 million or less, they were last year registered at the state level. They don't have to switch their registration to be SEC registered unless their assets under management are over 110 million. Now, the bumper, the threshold, this little area here is going to be true. What if the firm was SEC registered? So if the firm was SEC registered, they're going to do their annual renewal and they find that they have assets under management of under 90 million. So if their assets under management less than 90 million, they must switch to state. Okay, so once again, the rule says IAs register with the SEC if their assets under management are 100 million or more. Okay, 100 million or more. What's 20% of 100 million? 20 million, right? So 20% is the threshold. So if they go down below 90, okay, then they have to switch to state, or above 110, then they have to go from state to federal. So the 20,000, so 110 and not 20,000, 20 million, 110 million, 110, oh, 110 million, and 90 million. So that's where that 20% comes in. So these are when they must switch their registration. New for you in 2013 is when you are doing the net worth calculations. So net worth is a calculation that you use for the definition of accredited investor under SEC Regulation D and for persons to whom you can charge performance-based fees. So in doing a net worth calculation, you may no longer use the value of your investor's primary residence or any associated debt. You may no longer use the value of their primary residence or associated debt, which is, I mean, everybody's got to live somewhere, so I think that's a great rule. In doing the net worth calculation or assets under management calculation, you can include the client's assets along with their spouse's assets. You cannot combine the assets of two unrelated people, however. You cannot. So client and their spouse, yes. Client and an unrelated person, no. Performance-based fees. So the term, the definition for the individual to whom you can charge a performance-based fee has been updated. So once again, you know, I have no way of saying exactly what you're going to see on your test. They won't send me the darn test. But this has been around long enough that I believe you should know this. Performance-based fees. So we've always been able to charge a performance-based fee to clients that we call qualified purchasers. So these are institutional accounts, mutual fund companies, hedge funds, some private funds might fall into here, depends upon their assets under management. But we can charge performance-based fees in that situation. That was true before, and that is still true today. So performance-based fees are allowed under what we call SEC exemptive relief, so that this is a rule for SEC registered investment advisors. So SEC registered investment advisors can charge performance-based fees when the client is a qualified purchaser or meets the definition of what is called a qualified client. Qualified client. So I'm going to put up the old rule, so this was already covered in the course. The old rule said that if your client met the definition of a high net worth individual, that you could charge performance-based fees. So we said that if they had assets under management of $750,000 or more, then they would meet the definition of a high net worth individual, or they had a net worth of 1.5 million or more. So that's the old rule. Why do I talk about the old rule? Because if you are an SEC registered IA that has clients in a contract under the old rule, as long as they meet the rule that was in effect when their contract was originally signed, you can still continue to charge them performance-based fees, even if they might not meet the new rule. So it is this idea that you are allowed to maintain existing performance fee arrangements that were permissible at the time when the advisory contract was entered into, even if they wouldn't meet the requirements under the new rules. So what is the new rule? So the new rule says that the client has to have assets under management of $1 million or more. And then they really did change the term. This is the old rule, high net worth individual. The new rule, we call them a qualified client. Assets under management of $1 million or more. Or they can do it through a net worth calculation, net worth of $2 million or more. So can be the client along with their spouse. You can use the spouse's assets as well. So this is when an SEC registered investment advisor today, if they enter into a contract today, is allowed to charge performance-based fees. So one of the buzzwords, qualified client, new rule, high net worth individual, old rule. I can't say for sure which one of them you will have on your test. It is worthwhile to note, within the new rules, they did say that these threshold amounts must be adjusted for inflation every 5 years. So they will change, but not for a while. That concludes our discussion of current contribution limits, current tax laws, and for your Series 65-66 folks out there, it includes an update on the Dodd Frank legislation. Make sure to practice the quiz that follows this section. Good luck.